Okay guys, this is the 4.2 notes on the unit circle and our trig functions. So today's lesson is all going to have to do with specific measurements, angles, and ratings that are actually on the unit circle. We'll talk about stuff later in later sections where you have to evaluate with stuff that's not on the unit circle. But today, all you need to know is stuff with the unit circle. Okay, these are our 6 trig functions. You guys are all familiar with sine, cosine, and tangent. And then we have their reciprocal functions, which would be cosecant, secant, and cotangent. So as you see here, sine and cosecant are related, cosine and secant are related, and then tangent and cotangent are related. And you'll see that we are always going to be talking about a point, and it's going to have a specific x and y. So if I ask you for the sine of an angle that is on the unit circle, you would tell me whatever the y value is of that ordered pair, that's the sine. So the cosecant would be 1 over that value. Cosine is going to be the x part of the ordered pair. Secant would be 1 over that value. And then tangent is just y over x, and cotangent is x over y. So in order to evaluate this, and we're going to do a simple one here in the first example, and then the second one we're going to do a few more examples. But the first thing you do is you find the radian or degree measure that corresponds with the question. Then you're going to use the chart at the left. This is our sine, cosecant, cosine, secant, tangent, cotangent, to figure out what part of the ordered pair you're using or how you're using it. And then you're always going to rationalize the denominator, meaning that there's no radicals left in the denominator. So if I'm going to find the 6 trig functions for this first example, just given the point 3 over 5, and 4 over 5. So this is my x value, this is my y value. This is just an arbitrary numbers that I picked. So the sine of this angle, well, I look up here, sine is the y value. So the sine of this angle would be 4 over 5. Cosine is the x part of our ordered pair, so that would be 3 over 5. Our tangent is where we're going to say y over x. So the y part of my ordered pair is 4 over 5, divided by the x part is 3 over 5. So we obviously have to simplify that. 4/5 times, I'm going to flip 3 over 5 and becomes 5 over 3. We see that this cancels out, so I have 4 over 3. That's my tangent. So now if I'm going to do my reciprocal functions, the reciprocal to sine is cosecant. It's 1 over. So cosecant would be 1 over 4 over 5. And again, we would just simplify that. So it's 1 times 5 over 4, which equals 5 over 4. If you notice, what do? We just flip it. So the reciprocal of cosine is secant. So if my cosine is 3 over 5, then my secant is 5 over 3. And then my cotangent is the reciprocal of tangent. So instead of 4 over 3, we have 3 over 4. So that's how you would evaluate something given just a random point, which will be on your web assign. You'll be given a point. You just follow the rules of sine is the y value. The cosecant is the flipped. Cosine is the x value. Secant is the flipped. Tangent is y over x. Cotangent is x over y. So now let's go to the second example. So again, we are talking about the unit circle. You guys had to memorize the unit circle last year. This year, we're just going to give you one already completed, already filled in on your quiz, so you can just reference it easily. But everything is a pattern. If you notice in the first quadrant, which is right here, this is our first quadrant. At 30 degrees or pi over 6, it's x is root 3 over 2, y is 1/2. At 45 or pi over 4, it's root 2 over 2, root 2 over 2. And at 60 or pi over 3, it's 1/2 comma root 3 over 2. If you look all the way around, those numbers don't change. They stay in the same order, that sort of thing. The only thing that changes is signs. So once we do this a couple times, you guys will get the hang of it, and you won't even really have to look at the unit circle anymore, which is great. So let's go to these problems down here. So I told you the first thing you do, let's identify the ordered pair at a specific angle measurement. So pi over 6. If I go over here to pi over 6, it's root 3 over 2, comma 1/2. So I'm going to write down root 3 over 2, comma 1/2. And I'm going to label this. Root 3 over 2 is my x value, and 1/2 is my y. So we're going to find all 6 trig functions. We're going to find the sine of this angle, we'll call it theta. We'll find the cosine of theta. We'll find the tangent of theta, and then we will find the reciprocal functions, which would be cosecant theta, secant theta, and cotangent theta. So again, remind yourself, sine is the y value. If you need to put a little y right here to remind yourself, do that. Cosine is x, and tangent, again, reference is y over x. So the sine of theta is my y value, so that would be 1/2. So my reciprocal of 1/2 would be 2/1. That's my cosecant value. My cosine of theta is x value, which is √3/2. So that means my secant would be flipped over 2/√3. And then we say, uh-oh, we have a radical in the denominator. We can't have that. So we're going to rationalize top and bottom by √3. And we're left with 2√3/3. And then my tangent is my y value, my y coordinate, over x. So it's 1/2 divided by √3/2. So when we have this, we're going to have to keep change flip. 1/2 times √3/2 becomes 2/√3. And then you notice here that my 2's will cancel out, so I have 1/√3. Whoops, we can't have 1/√3, so we have to rationalize √3/√3. And I am left with √3/3 right there. So my cotangent is going to be x over y. We're going to flip it. So my x value is √3/2 divided by 1/2. So again, if we keep change flip, we have √3/2 times 2/1. So what happens here? My 2's cancel out. So my cotangent is just √3. So if we look at example B, I'm looking on the unit circle for the value 5π/4. So where is 5π/4? It happens to be right here. It's at -√2/2, -√2/2. So let's go back and evaluate all 6 trig functions. Again, it's at -√2/2, -√2/2. So make sure you keep your negatives and all that together. So again, our 6 trig functions: sine of theta, that's going to be my y value. I have cosine of theta, which is going to be my x value. And then tangent of theta is going to be y over x. And our reciprocals are the flip. So my sine, we'll do our cosecant over here, cosecant theta, secant of theta, and cotangent theta. So my sine, my y value is -√2/2. So then my cosecant value would be the opposite, the flip, -2/√2. Again, can you have a √2 in the bottom? No, so we're going to rationalize. √2. So I have -2√2/2. And then what happens to my 2's? They cancel out. So it's just -√2. My cosine, well, that's my x value. That happens to be -√2/2. Again, secant, we flip it. So this happens to be the same thing, but we'll do it again. -2/√2. Rationalize. Can't have a radical in the denominator, so I have -2√2/2, and then our 2's will cancel out. So again, we're left here with -√2. And then our tangent is going to be y over x. So your y value is -√2/2 divided by the x value, which is -√2/2. So if we're going to keep change flip, I have -√2/2 times, when I flip this, it becomes 2 over -√2. And what happens? Everything cancels out. So I'm left with just the number 1. So my tangent is 1, and cotangent will be the same thing if I have x over y. So I have -√2/2 divided by -√2/2. If we're going to rationalize, we're going to keep change flip first, times 2/√2 negative, and then rationalize. You don't have to because everything cancels out, so you're left with +1. My next value that I'm going to look at, C, I'll do it right here. We're talking where t equals pi. Well, on our lovely unit circle right here is pi. So I'm looking at the ordered pair, -1, 0. So I have -1, 0. My x is -1, my y is 0. So my trig functions are going to be sine of theta, which, guys, remember what is sine? It's our y value. Cosine theta, what's our cosine? It's our x value. Tangent of theta is going to be y over x. And then our reciprocals are the flip. So I have cosecant theta, secant theta, and cotangent of theta. So cosecant is 1 over y, secant is 1 over x, and cotangent is x over y. So sine of theta, what is the y value of my ordered pair? It is 0. So if I flip 0 over 1, right, this is 0 over 1. If I flip this, or if I just say, okay, the cosecant is going to be 1 over y, 1 over 0. Well, guys, what happens when you have 1 over 0? That is undefined. You'll have something like this on WebAssign, so make sure if it ends up being an undefined function, you have to, I don't know how they have you spell it out, if it's capitals or impossible or something, but just read the directions. So for cosine, that's going to be my x value. So my cosine of pi is -1. So if I say, okay, my secant is going to be 1 over -1, that again equals -1. We're good. And then tangent is going to be y over x. So it's 0 over -1, which equals 0. My cotangent is going to be x over y, so -1 over 0, which again, when 0 is in the denominator, what's our answer? Undefined. So when you are at one of the quadrant angles, or one of these angles that, 90, 270, 90, 180, 270, 360, notice the orders pair all have zeros in them. So that's where you'll have the possibility of an answer being undefined or impossible. So make sure you guys are paying attention to that, please. That's super important that you guys are going to see that. All right, and lastly, the last example, and then we're done. You guys can start your web sign. The last example is D. We'll do D right here. And D is a little different because look at the angle measure that they give us. It's negative. So I have T equals -pi over 3. So guys, let's think about this. If I go to positive pi over 3, it's right here at 60 degrees. I went up from 0. I went up here. So I went up 1, 2, 3 spaces. Since this is negative, that tells you the direction from the initial side, the standard position that they want us to go. So since it's negative, they want me to travel down. So I'm going to go down 3 spaces, 1, 2, 3. And this is the ordered pair that they want us to use. Negative pi over 3 is the same thing as positive 5 pi over 3. So the value, the ordered pair that they want us to use is positive 1/2. Positive 1/2. And negative √3 over 2. So negative √3 over 2. So again, this is my x, this is my y. And now we just go through and we evaluate our 6 trig functions. I have sine of theta, which is my y value. I have cosine of theta, which is my x value. And I have my tangent of theta, which is y over x. So then over here, I'm going to have my cosecant of theta, which is 1 over y. I have my secant of theta, which is 1 over x, our reciprocal functions, and then I have my cotangent of theta, which is x over y. So my sine of theta at this point, my y value equals negative √3 over 2. So my cosecant would be 2 over negative √3. And again, guys, we can't have a root in the denominator, so rationalize. Negative 2 √3 over 3. So my cosine is going to be my x value. My cosine is positive 1/2. If I flip that, or 1 over 1/2, my secant would just be 2 over 1, which is 2. And then lastly, we'll do our tangent. It's y over x. So my y value is negative √3 over 2. My x value is 1/2. So we're going to keep, change, flip. 2's cancel out. My tangent is negative √3 If I were to write x over y, or I just flip this, it would be 1 over negative root 3, but we'll watch, I'll show you. I'm going to write 1/2 divided by negative root 3 over 2. So again, guys, we're just going to keep, change, and flip. So if you notice, the 2's will cancel out. I have 1 over negative root 3. Cannot have a root in the denominator, so rationalize. And we end up with negative root 3 over 3. So it's really important, guys, that you get this in your brain. You have to know how to find your 6 trig functions. Your sine of an angle is going to be whatever the y part of the ordered pair is. Your cosine is the x part of the ordered pair, and your tangent is y over x. So your cosecant is 1 over the sine. Your secant is 1 over x, and your cotangent is x over y. And then you just simplify and rationalize. So go ahead and get started on your 4.2 WebAssign. We'll go over everything on Tuesday in class, and then we'll practice Tuesday and Wednesday for our quiz, which is going to be Thursday over sections 4.1 and 4.2.